Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, October 6, 2020. My name is Karen Bodenschatz, and I serve as Associate Pastor at First Lutheran Church in Onalaska, Wisconsin. And this is my morning musing. So I want to tell you the story of Pastor Jehu Jones this morning. I'll link a fuller biography of him that was written by Carl Johnson Jr. and Joseph Romeo for the Lutheran Quarterly back in 1996. I'll link that in the description of this video. I encourage you to read more about this amazing pioneer of the Lutheran Church in America. Pastor Jones was born in Charleston, South Carolina, about the year 1786. Little is known about his early life. We do know that his father was a freedman who at his death owned a hotel, having been a tailor before that. So Jehu Jones Jr. followed in his father's footsteps and was a tailor by occupation. He, like his father, was a member of St. Philip's Episcopal Church, but shortly after the Lutheran Church of German Protestants opened its doors to Black people in 1816, Jones and his wife became members, and when it was allowed for colored people to rent pews, he did that. There was a movement in the 1830s to resettle freed Black people to a colony in Liberia, and Jones was greatly in favor of this move, saying in one essay, "That country which holds out for us and to our children forever protection in life, liberty, and property." There were great financial incentives for the move as well. And they were preparing to move. As they were preparing to move, Jones sought to be appointed as a missionary. So he was sent to New York for approval to be ordained, and was indeed ordained on October 24th, 1812, to be minister and missionary of the Lutheran Church. He was 46 years old. After his ordination, he returned to his hometown of Charleston, where he was promptly arrested and jailed under a state law prohibiting free Blacks from entering the state. He was then given a choice: spend time in jail or leave Charleston immediately, and Jones chose to leave. And so after stopping at his home to say goodbye to his wife and to his children, he departed Charleston in haste. I want to note that this law was primarily meant to be applied to seamen who were docked in Charleston, and if others were arrested under this law, they were supposed to be given 15 days to leave the state before penalties were applied. What this meant for Pastor Jones was that he was no longer able to join the group that was heading to Liberia, despite several failed attempts to raise support and monies from Lutherans outside of Charleston to help him do that. He found no help. He was then advised to become a missionary in the United States, and so from that point on, Jones focused his attention solely on the domestic ministry. And in 1833, he reunites his family in New York and decides to settle in the city of Philadelphia. In June of 1833, he is recognized by the German Evangelical Lutheran Church of Pennsylvania as a regularly ordained minister and is appointed as a missionary for 4 months among the colored people of Philadelphia under their direction. It was within 3 months that he was able to report that he was able to collect a Lutheran congregation among Blacks in the city. And by January of 1834, he is seeking to establish a permanent church building for his congregation. In February, his congregation passes a resolution to build a church, and Pastor Jones is sent out to raise the monies to do so. And as he's raising that money, Jones also organizes 3 other congregations, one in Gettysburg, one in Chambersburg, and one that I could not find the name of. He reports this to the assembly gathered in May of 1834, and they are gratified, that's a quote, gratified with the results. That will pretty much be the last time we hear any gratification or support of Pastor Jones from the larger church body. By the time the church was dedicated in May of 1836, Jones had raised $1,400 of the roughly $3,400 needed, which is incredible. But it does mean that there was debt being carried by this very small and impoverished church. And at this point, The creditors were putting pressure on Jones for the money. Appeals were made to the larger church, and Jones sought help from the Synod of Pennsylvania. The committee that reviewed the letter found it impractical, this is a direct quote, for the Synod to accede to his wishes. And so the Synod accepted that report and no help was given. This would be the case for the rest of the time that the church was in that building, even to the extent that the Synod body would demand that the church be put in their name and that Jones give up part of his salary. The church lost its building, but they continued to worship. In 1849, Jones wrote to the Synod of New York asking for aid to establish a Lutheran church among African Americans in New York City. Despite his faithfulness for years and his ability to raise funds and to build churches, his request was denied. And not only was it denied, but they choose to censor him and to malign his character. And while this was countered by others, it had a lasting effect. Jehu Jones died in 1852. And he should be remembered for his unflagging commitment to his missionary calling and his steadfast faith in the teaching of the Lutheran Church, of the Lutheran doctrine. I encourage you to read his story in more detail. He is a founding father of what would become the ELCA, and someone we should all be grateful for. On Thursday, I'm going to talk about why this story is important to know and how we, here in 2020, might begin to right the wrongs our church did against him and other Black leaders. Until then, be well, be kind, and know that Christ is with you.